Amber, thank you so much for coming.
Of course. Love being here with you. Always
I
a
got
treat.
it is you are a treat for everybody. I received your book, and it's, first of all, the first thing you know about your book when you look at it, it's so beautiful. And I was like flipping through it. I was like, I have to sit down and read this because it's like calling to me like a siren. It's so beautiful. And the work in the book is so beautiful. I think we should just dive right in. You've been here before. If people want to go back and listen to that episode, we'll link to it. But this book is so important. And I want to dive in. So the answers are within you. Why did you want to write that book?
It's interesting because I think when I was writing it, I thought I was making it for others, but I realized that when I finished it, it was actually a permission slip I was writing myself. And it was really coming from the idea that, in modern society, there is so much noise in the world around us. There are so many opinions, so many authorities, so many people telling us how we ought to live our lives. And I think particularly in the last couple of years in the pandemic, there's just been more noise, more fear, more anxiety, more uncertainty, which has created a level of, disconnection from ourselves, our bodies, our source. And so the book is really a reminder that the answers, approval, whatever it is that you're seeking, can't be found out there. It resides within you. And so it's filled with reminders and prompts and questions and illustrations that are all designed to really guide you back home to yourself. And, so many books these days are like, here's what to do. They're more prescriptive in nature. And I didn't want to tell people what to do. I wanted to show them what to ask so they could find their own answers.
Yeah, it's huge because, it's interesting. Gary Zukav was here and he was talking about how we have insight when we close our eyes, right? Not from looking out around us all the time, but he said the mole, like animal, the mole is so wise because it's like, it's looking inside. It doesn't have its eyes open. And we forget that anything's inside of us because we're constantly looking at this illusion that it's all outside. So in this book, you talk about several important pieces, and I just want to like go through them a little bit, see as much as we can go through. Great. So first of all, you talk about embracing rejection, which for a lot of people, that is a hard no. Like rejection is just all kinds of bad. What's your approach to that?
My thinking is that rejection is redirection, because anything that's meant for me, I believe will find me. And, I think of the process of even writing my first book. I got rejected by so many literary agents who, at first it was like, stabbed to the heart, like, I'm not good enough. What's wrong with me? Our minds can go to these different places. And ultimately, that all of those no's eventually led me to the woman that I work with today, who is like my person in terms of literary agents. And I feel like in each of those conversations, I learned something about how I was presenting the material. I learned something about, whether it was resonating, what wasn't landing, and just like how I was showing up and presenting. And sometimes, I realized I may have been performing and not as authentic as I would have liked. And so I feel like when we have moments of rejection, it's an opportunity to take a step back and reflect and be like, am I presenting as my true self here? Or am I performing to try to get a yes? And then allowing the rejection just be like, when I worked with Seth Godin so many years ago, he would always say, make more mistakes. It was something he embedded in us, because mistakes and failures are actually just learnings and wisdom in disguise. And so when we can learn to view mistakes, rejection, failure in that same way as learnings, as insight, then that we can apply that to the steps that we take moving forward.
I know this is so cheesy, but just last night I was blasting this Rascal Flatts song, which is Bless the Broken Road. And like, I mean, I'm a Jewish girl who's been living in LA. Like, I don't know that I'm their like target audience, but like, I'm into it, man. Like this song, God bless the broken road that led me straight to you. And I just think about the miscarriages I had before I had my daughter. And like, I wouldn't have had her. I would have had some other person, or I think about meeting my husband after a broken engagement. And
Mm,
I think about the things in my life that I even get to do because of the pain or because of something I went through. And that song feels so true to me that it's all happening for us. It's all a gift. And I love that you say it that way. I've quoted you saying rejection is redirection a lot of times. So
mm,
that's a very beautiful way to put it. You also talk about redefining and
mhm,
reimagining what success is. And this is so big because we live in such an achievement oriented, happiness is only when you are whatever quote unquote success is.
mhm.
So what does it mean to you to redefine and reimagine success?
I think we so often focus on success being this outward quest. And to me, success is more about who am I becoming in the process of getting there or making that thing or becoming this partner or parent or whatever it is that we're doing in our lives. I think when it's always there, focus, then we lose sight on the moment that we get to be in, the journey we get to take to get there. And so, so many people say success is about the destination, but truly. And that what helps me is to really think about instead of it's like moving from for to from. So instead of doing things for power, doing them from power. Instead of doing things for love, doing them from love. Instead of doing things for joy, doing them from joy. And I notice that when I'm coming from that from, it just infuses every day with so much more intentionality and purpose and authenticity. And then oftentimes where I end up going, I might say I want to create this and this is what it's going to look like and here's my 3-year plan. But 6 months in, when I'm coming from such a place of truth and authenticity and integrity, what happens is that new doors open. There's like a trap door with a hidden road, and life takes me on some journey that I could have never imagined or predicted. And I think that's the beauty of letting success be this emergent path that's more based on just living from truth and authenticity and integrity. Because
Yes.
what's going to emerge is that's the mystery of life that we then get to dance with.
It's so good. And you said this word before, like certain. And I think it's the ego that just like where the ego is built to protect, right? That's where the mind comes in and we want certainty. And then you said, but that dirt road that leads to the path that leads to the doorway. And it's like, you know, and like you just moved and like I'm like, where are you? And it's like you never would have known that you'd wind up in that place in that house near that creek. And it's so special. That's what makes it so like we all want this like transcendent experience that feels beyond the horizon. And
Right.
yet, in order to have that, we have to be willing to surrender, knowing how it's going to look and holding on to the outcome.
Totally. I'll touch on it a little bit. I last May, my partner and I of 10 years, my husband and I, we separated. And that was the most difficult, terrifying, scary moment of my life. And it was just, I didn't want to hurt people. I was afraid of what happened I mean, there was just
I can't
everything,
even
what people would
imagine.
think. I mean, it was just so overwhelming. Um, though I will say, that decision came from what was authentic and honest and true. And, what a big part of it was like, oh no, we failed. Like, we've been together for this long. Why can't we make it work? What's wrong with us? Like, should I be ashamed? And eventually I came to the remembering, thanks to a dear friend, that he was like, I look at your relationship and I'm like, wow, did they go for it? They grew so much. They put their hearts into it. And they are like different people now than who they were in the beginning. What a success. Like, who says that just because a marriage ends, it means that you failed? And that perspective was, I found to be not only really helpful, but it helped me move through all of the different emotions that were coming to the surface. And then back to what we're just saying, I didn't necessarily expect or see that coming, but there were all these hidden doors. I didn't know I was going to come to LA, end up in Topanga. Like, the life I'm living now, I never could have imagined. And it took moving through so much heartache and pain and angst and discomfort to really, but I knew it was what was true. And so I had to follow that.
Oh my God. Not that men can't relate to that, but 91% of this audience is women. And I
Mhm.
just feel like we don't talk about that enough, what you just said. And it's like really juicy. I feel like there's a lot of people in relationships who are abandoning themselves, but thinking it's
Yes.
better. And then there's a lot of people who are leaving, but really should be staying because that's actually not authentic, right? Like that whole conversation, I feel like we should have a lot more. So I applaud you. And I'm reminded that when I was like, I think sometime after college, I remember reading Al Gore and his wife had gotten divorced. And I read this letter that she wrote as like an op-ed in the New York Times saying, if I would have just left a job after 40 years, you'd be celebrating me. You'd be like saying, I did such a phenomenal job doing this for so long. And she's like, and Al and we have gorgeous kids and we've been friends and we lived through so much. And I think it's a lot to celebrate, actually. And I was just like, it gives me chills to think that she said that. I've never heard anybody else say that so publicly. And she was damn right. Like, that's an extraordinary thing to be in a relationship with somebody, and that's a beautiful gift that your friend gave you, that perspective. And yeah, it's like, what a cool thing that you just laid out as a possibility, that on the other side of the thing that would scare you the absolute most, that would require you to hold space for lots of pain, could be this freedom and this feeling that you could never have even planned for, that really sets your soul on fire. And to just sit with that, because so often, right, we run the other way from anything that feels like it could be uncomfortable. And so another one of the themes in your book, which it's not exactly related, but it is related on some level, is you talk about setting boundaries. And why that's related to me is because when you've been codependent and you've been a people pleaser for a long time, then it really feels terrifying to set a boundary. So I'm sure that, if you're writing about that, and I've read some of what you wrote, you can speak to that a little bit. And I know that comes from for our audience. So what do you say to women who have a condition of wanting to be liked and wanting everyone to feel good, and therefore kind of set themselves on fire instead?
Yeah. I've been deep in this with my therapist.
Yeah, me too.
She calls it the pleasing disease, which I am just like, oh, I love that I have a label for it. And just, I've been exploring the history of self-betrayal and all the ways I learned to abandon myself to keep the harmony and peace. And it's funny for me because I was someone who was like, I live in my truth. I like speak my truth, and like truth is my value, which I truly believe that it was, until now I look back and I'm like, oh no, there were some ways I was definitely abandoning myself. But that's the gift of perspective. And what I have to say about boundaries is that, like, it all comes back to, for me, what do I value? What do I value the most? And then how do I have my life be a reflection of that? So there's two thoughts on boundaries. I'll do both. But one is like, I value authenticity. I value integrity. I value self-care. I value quality time with people that I love. Like, I think sometimes our response to boundaries is like, I don't like this, and so I'm going to set a boundary. And while I think sometimes when anger arises, it is an opportunity of like, this isn't feeling right, something's off here. And I think sometimes when it's a reaction, we don't always get beneath what's really happening to understand what is really the unmet need here that we are trying to design for and design around. And so the reason I like to start with values is because, like, I'm trying to think of an example. Like, maybe my partner did something or didn't do something that I wanted him to do. And so he didn't follow through, and I'm mad and I'm angry and boundaries, and I'm not going to put up with this anymore. But like, what that really is, I think, illuminating and pointing to is that, like, I really value integrity. And so what is then the need for me around integrity? It might be that I'm going to follow through on the small things that I commit to myself and say I'm going to do. And then with that sort of understanding of what the need is, then we can set, okay, what are the steps to meet this? And so, like, I'm going to go on a nourishing walk every evening. I don't know, whatever it is for you. But that's been a framework that's helped me. Or I value self-care, so I'm not going to set alarm clocks these days, or I don't know, or I'm going to have a morning practice at this time. Has helped me to, like, to think about boundaries in a less, I think, reactive way.
That's such a cool take on it because you just made it all about like, I mean, 98% of what you just said was like, make sure that you're aware of your own needs
Mhm.
and like attend to that. And then it's much easier to navigate where you need to set a boundary. And you're right.
Mhm.
So often we are so depleted and so disassociated from our own self care at all that we just then kind of sling ideas or assign certain things or pretzel ourselves thinking we have to for other people and build up resentment when a lot of that could be avoided if
Mhm.
we just listen to what you just said and just said, all right, so that I'm going to take dominion over that.
Yeah, yeah, and that's really like I feel like that's more boundaries with self, and the reason I went there first is because so often I think we think about boundaries with other people, and I found that when my boundaries are really clear and I'm meeting my needs with myself, I tend to be far less reactive with
Yeah.
like the people in my lives. I tend to have like a little bit more compassion. I'm not mad that they're not doing the thing that I'm not doing myself, you know? Because I'll be like, they're not doing that thing. It's like, wait, am I doing that thing for me?
I
um,
totally hear that. And one of the other things you talk about in the book, which really dovetails nicely into this conversation, is you talk about gaining clarity and courage to listen and trust our own intuition. And it's kind of goes back to where we started, which really is the overall theme of this is like connecting to self, right? Not your ego, which gosh, everybody, I'll put a link to your first book, Choose Wonder Over Worry, because Amber does such a good job for those of you listening in really helping you hear the different voices that like your mind makes up of all these different parts and then coming back to self, like what is like your center. How do you do that? You talk about trusting your intuition. How do you listen to all the characters and then know which one to sort of say, oh, but that's my intuition versus anything else?
Yeah. And I think we've talked about this. I have a lot of characters in my head. I've got like anxious Annie that's like, "Ah!" I've got Grace the perfectionist who's British and is like, Amba, that's not good enough. And then I've got Doc who's this imposter who is like a professor at Harvard. And Doc's like, Amber, did you check your data point on that? So I've got lots of voices. I'm not a crazy person, I swear. No, I think it's important to and that is just notice for me the difference between, let's say, like fear and intuition is where is the voice coming from and what does it sound like? So I know that I'm dealing with like fear, for example, what's not intuition and clarity. When it's a lot of fast moving, speeding thoughts, there's like a anxious quality to it. It's very in my head and I feel disassociated and disconnected from my body. And it's often coming from a place of like needing to control, solve, fix, or make something go away. Whereas like intuition, it's just a process of like right now, I'll do this thing where I close my eyes and I literally feel myself drop into my like gut area. And if I'm feeling really busy, actually, a visualization that I'll do is I'll close my eyes and I'll imagine that there's a little me on a diving board in my brain. And I'll imagine that I jump off the diving board and like go all the way down and like eventually like I take this big dive and eventually land into this pool of water. And then I've like landed in the like zone of my source and intuition. And then once I'm there, I'll ask a question and I'll be like, what's the next right move? Or what do you really think about this? Or how does this opportunity, really feel? Or what's really going on that you're scared to say? I'll just ask the questions. And then that, like, once I'm in that place of like stillness and like softness and more surrender and open listening, that voice speaks.
It's so powerful. I could just feel it. Yeah, it's really cool to even just articulate and then you ask a question, what's the next right step or what do I need to know from this place? How does this actually feel? Because so often when I ask people questions or I hear people in their own conversation, they're like, I just don't know. I just don't know. And it's like, that's a lie.
Hmm.
You do know. you just avoid what you know for some
Mhm,
reason,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
Like you've turned off the volume on
mhm.
what you know because
Mhm.
it feels like either what would you say? Why do we think we don't know or can't access it?
I mean, when I hear people say, "I don't know," I hear, "I'm scared." I'm scared to know is actually what I hear. I'm scared to go there. I'm scared to, reveal the truth. I'm an avid journaler. I teach a lot of journaling workshops, and so many people come to me and they're like, "I'm afraid of what's going to come out on the page."
Yep.
And because that's the place the intuition loves to speak. That's the place where you can get the noise and the ego out of the way, and then all of a sudden another voice starts piping up, and you're like, "Whoa, who is this? This is the voice of my truth." And I think that truth can be scary for a lot of people because truth, can have a lot of repercussions like that. I mean, that's been the last year of my life. I wrote this book because I was like, Amber, listen to the answers within you. You've been avoiding and running and not listening, literally, is what I now realize.
Wow. And for you, and this is what's so beautiful about life is it it's always about our world is a reflection, right, of what's inside. And so you don't have to share because it really isn't even about him or your
Mhm.
your your ex. It's like, what was it in you that you were avoiding knowing about you, just or about yourself?
What was I avoiding knowing? I think very simply that, like, this wasn't right and true. I think I was avoiding knowing that we were just best friends. I think I was avoiding knowing that my deepest needs weren't being met and I was letting that be okay. I think it's, when I look back now, I'm like, "Ooh, there were like a lot of like deep fundamental human needs that like weren't really alive in the container of our marriage." And that's not like I'm not to shame him or even to shame me because I part of me was like, "Well, shame on you, Amber. What were you doing?" And he's a beautiful human, but it was just like I think I was afraid to admit what was really true because if I did, I knew what that meant, and I knew that meant that I would have to leave, and that was very scary because I didn't know where I would go. I didn't know uh, how he would feel. I didn't know how everyone else would feel. I didn't know. We had built so much in our life that the thought of like blowing that up and destroying that was scarier than doing what was true for me. And so I kept pushing down my truth because it's like that following my truth is actually um yeah, it's scary to go here. And so it was just like too hard to hear until it became too loud and I couldn't ignore it.
For so many people who are listening, maybe they could benefit from your beautiful courage. And now that you've lived that experience and you've also lived other experiences where you're in different relationship in different constellations, what's your perspective on when you can trust that it really is your truth versus it's actually your fear, right? Because sometimes
Mhm.
people who have, like, for me, I come from an interesting world where like my attachment style is like, where's the door? Where's the door? Let's get it. So like I have to sort of like whoop, like scoop myself back up all the time. And it's a pattern in my life. So
Avoidant?
just yeah, I'm both. I'm the best.
Okay,
I'm anxious avoidant.
disorganized.
I'm
Okay,
anxious and
okay.
avoidant. It's awesome.
Okay.
So yeah, so I'm like, I'm good, I have no needs, and then I'm like, and when is this ending? Exit, exit, exit. So
Yeah.
you have been in different iterations of different relationship, right? And so it's like I'm just curious your perspective on like, when do you think it's this is my truth versus yeah, okay, like this is you needing to come back, share what you need, and da 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 da. Because I think that's something that the women, especially listening to this, and men, but I think it's something that we could all benefit from hearing your perspective on.
Yeah, for me, it was I wish I could say this is I just knew. is like all I can say. And there were, we were together for, what was it, 10 years? We were there for a minute. We tried. Like there were several breaks in the relationship where I remember Esther Perel saying like, this is the end of your relationship. Would you like to start a new one? And so there were like new restarts within the restarts. Okay, let me try. I feel like I tried myself out. Like it was, and there was even a point in my life where when I was living in New York City and I felt so disconnected from myself and something felt so off and I could not figure out what was off in my life. I was like so tired. I like slept for a month. I thought I was like burnt out on the other side of a book. Like when my first book came out, it was like roaring, 10 city tour. And then all of a sudden when I got home, I like hit a wall and I was so exhausted. I couldn't get out of bed for like 2 months. And I was like, okay, I gotta check, like, what's going on here? And so I like looked at my work and I was like, let me make changes in my work. And then I looked at my self-care and I was like, let me make changes in this. And then like I looked at I literally made changes in what am I eating? What am I drinking? I like made changes in every area of my life. Where am I living? Okay, let me leave New York City, move across the country. And ultimately realize that like the true source of disconnection was actually the relationship. And so, but it took me another 2 years to really like know that. And so I feel like sometimes, I was talking to a girlfriend, El Luna. I don't know if she's been on the show. And I was like, I feel a little bit of shame because I feel like, why didn't I like do something sooner? Why didn't I if I like knew this, because I had inklings over the years of like, and she's like, I think that once you knew, you did something about it. And there was a period of time where you just didn't know. And so that was a helpful framing for me. So it's like, how do you know the difference between fear and that knowing? Is that like, I think there was both that were there. And I think they kind of were hand in hand. There was a fear of certain needs never being met. And in that, there was a knowing that maybe this isn't right and true. So I wish I had like a better, I feel like I don't have the right answer for that, but
no, it's all beautiful. It's all beautiful. And I recently was speaking to a woman. She's wonderful. She works with Byron Katie, and I was like, she was coaching me, and she was saying, do you feel like you always make the decision, or do you feel like sometimes there's also, while you have your own river of your life is a river, and life itself sort of is meeting you, and then the decision is clear. And she goes, for instance, like, have you ever been like trying to figure out where you're going to eat or where you're going to move or what book you're going to buy? And you think, do you really think you made the decision? Or do you think, wait a minute, I actually bought that book because I was in Carline yesterday picking up my daughter, and this woman said, you should get that book. And she just happened to be walking outside. And then I was looking at the TV and I saw so-and-so interviewing so-and-so, and it reminded me of the thing. And then I walked into the store and I saw it. I was like, I'm getting the book right now. Like, that's what I'm doing, buying the book. Like, there is this river called life.
Yes. This is exactly it. This is it.
That freed me so much, because it's like
so true. It's so true. We put so much pressure on ourselves that we need to know, and we need to figure out if it's intuition or fear. But like that, I mean, that's what happened. We moved to Baja. We were working on a land project. Like it was all of these random coincidental things that all formed into this exact moment where I realized this is no longer right and true.
Right.
And I didn't fully know until that exact moment. And when I knew in that exact moment, it came from a place of like, shoo. It didn't come from, it came from, shoo. And then it was like, okay, now that I know that, I can't unknow that or unsee that.
Exactly.
So here we go.
Yeah.
But you're right. There were so many external factors that played a role in that knowing coming into, and I like that, because it's like, it's so much like we could be like, so then it's like we're constantly inquiring and thinking and reflecting and all of that, where it's like, be in the river of life and let life also dance with you and reveal to you what's true.
Exactly. And then when you actually allow yourself to just open your eyes to what's inside and all around you, you go, it's so obvious what the information has stacked up to be.
Yeah.
This is what I'm doing now. Boom.
Yeah.
That's it. So it's like, woo! I love that.
I have goosebumps.
I know. It totally freed me. totally freed me.
I'm free. You just freed me.
Yes. Yes. I knew I could do that. So, it's so good. You're right. That like ping ponging, I mean, and so much of your first book was about that, like the worry and the wonder and what's true and what's not. And like, oh gosh, do we just get caught in this place? And it's like,
Yeah.
I love to just say like, move. Like when you're in, it's like, how can you move your body? How can you move your emotion? How can you get outside? It's like, go back into the stream. There's a whole stream there. Get right back in that current and you're going to go, oh, here comes some more clarity right here, right around the corner. You also talk about, I guess the thing that I think is bigger pandemic than anything, which is the self-doubt and comparison that we all have on some level. And so how do you overcome that? And how do you want people reading this book to deal with that?
I think in twofold. I think envy and comparison, a helpful reframe for me, particularly creatively, is that it's inspiration in disguise. So typically I see it, everything is a mirror. So if I'm looking at someone, I'm like, damn it, they're doing that thing that I really want to do. Why am I not doing that? That is like, oh, that is desire that I'm feeling for something that that person is embodying.
Yeah.
And so instead of going into a place of like, oh, like beating myself up because I'm not doing that thing, it's like, oh, that's admiration, inspiration. Great. What about that resonates with me? How can I apply that to my practice? And so it's like I find envy to be so helpful of like, oh, that's interesting. But then it's like, if it's like body image stuff, like I had eating disorders in my teenage years and early 20s. And there's still a part of me that like has this not enough story. And so like, if, there, I can very quickly be like, start, spiraling into not enoughness. If I like, see someone who's more fit or something like that. And for that just illuminates to me like a place within me that wants love and compassion and to be met with so much gentleness. And like that's not like, oh, I need to be more fit now. That's like I need to meet myself with tenderness. And like that's a place within me that's still like, there's a wound there. And I can meet that part of me with like a lot of kindness.
I love that. And I also just want to give you this compliment, which it's so genuine. I'm just thinking about it in this moment, but we've talked a lot on the show about the 5 biggest regrets of the dying, and Bronnie Ware was here recently too. And
Ooh.
it was really fun to have her. And just that idea that like the number one thing is that people don't feel they live life on their terms. And it's just interesting to hear you sharing all this because I think of you as somebody I know so many people, we all kind of know so many people, right? Looking at people on social and everything else. I think of you as someone who really lives life authentically on your own terms. And it's so sexy to me. Like, I'm like, oh, I could just like watch you like living your life. And it evokes so much yummy in me. And it's beautiful. And it gives me so much permission. And you do it so well. And I kind of want to hear a little bit about it and what your days and your weeks look like and how maybe you could offer how other people could have that kind of like authenticity and freedom in their day.
Well, I will give the caveat that I am still, I don't have a family yet. So I feel like when I describe, I have so much freedom still. I think when I like move into mama land and all of that, like I'm very like that is going to be the ultimate, I think, challenge for me is how do I like care and attune to this being with so much of my love and presence while also attuning to myself with love and presence. I think that's going to be like, I'm nervous and excited for that.
Yeah.
But that aside, I think, I just moved into a place in Topanga and my days right now, I mean, it's really seasonal because it depends on what I'm creating, what I'm launching. But yesterday I went and I hiked for 90 minutes and then I went to the ocean and I jumped in the ocean to do a salt cleanse. And then I came back and then I showered and then I've been finding joy in mundane tasks though, like laundry and dishes and all of these things. After this, I'm going to go water. I have an event with Microsoft, but after that, I'm going to go water all the yard. And it's like, I'm finding that particularly for me being in nature, it makes everything just like, it's about like bringing presence to every single thing
Yeah.
that I'm doing, whether that's like wiping water off of a dish or like doing laundry and like shaking out the clothes. I'm finding that like it's all a meditation. So whether I'm on a hike and moving my body or dipping into the ocean or like sipping a glass of wine, which maybe has more like ecstatic bliss, or like, meeting a friend or like whatever it is, but it's like, for me, it's about remembering that like life is this eternal moment. And if I can bring my full presence to it, even if I'm like in the throes of conflict and a fight, if I can bring my full presence to it and like use that as an opportunity to not go away, but to stay, and to stay into the discomfort, and to stay and to like be like, ask myself, what is true for me here? I don't know. That's what's been alive for me lately, is just the beauty of finding the beauty in every moment, whether it's a mundane task or something that brings me deeply alive.
It's like listening to music. I love it. I'm so like entranced. It's so good. Like that's like what you just described is in the movie in my mind of my life. That's how I want to live the movie. And instead I spend a lot of time on Zoom. It's fine. It's
Mm-hmm.
actually, the Zoom has been, it's fantastic. I'm doing stuff like this, which really does light me up so much.
Mm-hmm.
And I just listen to you and I'm like, when she gets to like 98, she's going to look back and go, I showed up for like all these tiny moments. And you're going to feel like those are the moments like you lived your life versus like, wait, what happened? I was so busy.
Yeah. Well,
Where did it go?
that's what I'm trying to do. I mean, like, I feel you. When I launched this book, it's like I all interviews all week. And it was on the other side of it. I was dizzy and I was like, I love my
Yeah.
book and I'm so excited for this to be out there. And like, woo, like, it's like it is. And that's why I try to think of it seasonally. And so for me, if I know in a sprint, like, okay, I'm going to
Yeah.
sprint around this for this period of time. I know when the sprint is, and then like I try to bake in as much play and adventure as I can in nature. But yeah, I feel you.
It's awesome. It's so good. When you talked about launching, other than this beautiful book, what's in your heart that you want to sort of put in the world, and how can people like work with you? And is there a workshop coming up? Is there something
Mm.
else that you're sort of holding space for?
Yeah, let's see, soon, I'm really focusing on journaling as my core offering, because I've realized that like if the one thing like in my life consistency, I know my truth on the page before, like that's where I admit myself the truth. So it's like if I don't know the truth about my life, once I start writing, I'm like, all right, there we go. So I'm going to start hosting monthly workshops with different themes, which I'm so excited about. I actually, with the launch of this book, did a virtual retreat for people who pre-ordered the book, and we had a talk with Young Pueblo and
I
the
love
class. He's so amazing. The class did a 30-minute workout, and like we had all these things, and then I led people through a journaling workshop, and it healed me. I was like, I didn't know I needed this so much. And I like opened up to a small community about some of the shame I was feeling about ending the marriage. And we journaled with shame. And like, we all went there and everyone was sharing. And it was just on the other side of it, I was like, whoa, this is the thing that I want to teach. So I actually didn't know. It's funny because I've been for a year, been like, what is the new offerings I want to do? And then I was in the river of life. And then the river of life revealed to me, do it like this. And I was like, okay. So anyway, I'm going to start doing monthly workshops. I have new journals coming out. And yeah, I'm building a bunch of like offerings that help people connect to and unlock the truth and answers within them through the practice of journaling.
It's so good, and I want to be there, so I want to know about it,
Yes,
and
I'll let you know.
I'll let my audience know too. And then on that note, the last question is like, if people were going to leave here now and
Mm-hmm.
take one of the prompts, book
Mm,
has many, and
mm-hmm.
journal on it, tell us two things. One, just give us one prompt that you think would be good to start with, and two, what are some like parameters that help you actually access like
Mm-hmm.
your wisdom?
Okay, tell me how deep we want to go on a level of 1 to 10.
A 10.
Okay.
11.
Okay, so my question is,
How much truth and light do you want to hold for? All of it.
know, I'm like, okay, I've got a few questions popping in my head. One's like real intense. Okay. And I was thinking I was going to go intense. The question I would leave you with, grab pen and paper, set a timer for 10 minutes, and at the top of the page, write, what truth am I afraid to admit to myself? And then just write. And if it might start with like, I don't know if there's anything I don't, like the ego might start to jump in, or like, ooh, I don't want to go there. This is uncomfortable. Right. My advice to you is for those 10 minutes, try not to put down your pen and just write and see where it takes you. Would be my thinking for that. And then in terms of like, what was the second part of that question?
Like, do you have any parameters or ways in which people can think about journaling to just pull out more of that truth?
Yeah, I think for me, journaling, a few things that come to mind is that like there's no right or wrong answer. And just like letting it be this space where you get to connect with yourself. I think another parameter around journaling is that there's a lot of people that are like, you have to do it at the same time every day. That doesn't necessarily like work for me. I think once we like put discipline with it, it kind of takes away some of the beauty. And then in terms of like, it's just like, yeah, keep asking the question. So, and maybe ask the question a few days in a row to see what comes to the surface. Like James Clear, actually, he posted something that I loved. And he was like, if you're unclear in your life, ask yourself, what do I really want? And ask yourself that question every day for 30 days. And like, you'll figure out what you really want. And so I think like that's helpful too. And so I used that like last spring. I was like, what do I really want? I was like journaling, what do I really want? And I was what do I really want? And it was interesting to see what surfaced. And I feel like day 1 to 2 to 3, I was like, I don't know what I really want. And then day 4, I was like, I want this. So the thing about questions is that they activate our subconscious. So even like if we are in the practice of like, what truth am I afraid to admit to myself? We might write on it. That question is going to stay with us for a little bit. Like we might dream about the question, like it's going to come alive in other ways. So I think just like simply sitting with questions and like, sometimes I'll see a question then where I'm like, okay. And I'll like let myself like, let it sort of like be in the river of life with it for the day. And then I love this river of life thing. I'm not letting like stealing it from you. I will give you credit. And then all of a sudden there's a moment where it's like, oh, that's what wants to come through.
As you speak this over us, I'm just like, we hardly ask ourselves anything. Like that's what I'm just like, oh my God. Like, I did that every day for 30 days. I'm like, I don't ask myself anything ever. Even what do I want for lunch? I hardly know the answer because I'm so used to not even asking it. So it's like, I just have a coffee and call it. It's so unhealthy. So this is so important. You are so beautiful. Like you are just beauty outside and inside, it. Come on. And this work is so important. So tell us where we can go get this book, which will be the beginning of everybody who's listening. This is like you diving into this journaling thing. Get this book. It's going to awaken all of this stuff. You're going to love it. And so tell us where we can get the book and then where we can find you.
The book is available everywhere books are sold, Amazon, your local indie, Barnes and Noble, all those fun places. If you're listening internationally, Book Depository ships worldwide for free. You can also go to amberray.com and I've got all the links there. And then I'm on Instagram, Hey Amber Ray. And if you go to my Instagram, the link in my bio, I actually have a free guide for journaling. I'll give you guys the link, which is like 3 methods to unlock your inner truth. So it gives you 3 different things. And in there are tons of questions. I think I have like 20, I call them soul prompts, which are these sort of questions you can begin to answer or to ask yourself.
Oh, okay, great. We'll put that link in the show notes. This was so much fun. I'm going to DM you because now I'm like, I'm ready to move to Topanga tomorrow. And
but you're in LA. We have to hang out.
I'm not in LA anymore.
You left here.
We're not in LA right now. Oh God. I grew up in South Florida. We came back to South Florida during the pandemic, then went back to LA. Then my dad got sick. Then we came for Thanksgiving and didn't leave. And we don't know where we're going to be, but I would love to try after 18 years of being in the city of LA. I'd love to try being in LA in the woods.
Yeah,
I love that you're there.
it's really
Awesome.
special.
Okay. You're really
Okay.
special. Thank you for coming.
This is so fun.
Okay. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, bye.
Bye.